How many people in here have either read the book or attended one of the other talks that I gave? So, because the reason I'm asking, I want to try to figure out how much of, I have to go over the old stuff and how much I can get to the new stuff. But it looks like most everyone knows. Who has not read the book or attended the talk? So I'll give a brief rundown for you guys. Which book, did someone say? Holographic Universe. This book.
Is that the most recent?
Yeah. And if you could pass those. Everyone take one. Oh, bless you. Aren't you kind? Thank you very much.
They didn't take the hand.
I know they did, didn't they?
Would you mind? Just bring the card down.
Okay, I'm Michael Talbot, as I'm sure all of you have figured out by now. And for those of you who don't know what the holographic idea is, let me just give a brief rundown of it. What I really want to talk about today are some of the practical applications of the holographic idea, because it's got some fascinating information with all kinds of implications, but I don't think that they're valuable unless we can sort of bring them into our everyday life and use them in some way, and that's really something that's very important to me. And when I wrote this book, that wasn't the focus, so when I give talks, it always is part of the focus, the practical information, how we can sort of incorporate it into what we do. And so I've realized that I'm probably going to have to write another book that gives some of this information, but that's what I'm going to talk about today. The holographic idea is an idea that was created in tandem by two men working separately, a physicist named David Bohm, who's a former protege of Einstein's, and a neurophysiologist named Carl Pribram. And briefly, Pribram discovered, for example, that the brain uses the same mathematics to decipher perception as involved in the making of a hologram. And a hologram is a three-dimensional image made with the aid of a laser light. Bohm, in studying subatomic reality, discovered that there are properties on the subatomic level that suggest that the very fabric of reality is put together like a hologram. If you put these two ideas together, that our brains are programmed to decipher something holographic and reality is structured like a hologram, it suggests that maybe reality is a kind of giant hologram. Not that it's made out of laser light, but that it's more of a construct than the sort of sticks and stones world that we were taught about in high school science class. Now, there are three broad areas where this has implications, the idea that reality is kind of a hologram, and I'll touch upon the first one only briefly, although I think it's very important, but it's not going to be the focus of this talk. And the first one has to do with the interconnectedness of all things, and it involves a very special quality that holograms have. If you take a piece of photographic film that has a holographic image encoded in it, that means when you look at it with your naked eye, you're just going to see a blur. You have to shine a laser light through it to reconstruct a three-dimensional image. So say the film has an image of a rose encoded in it. You shine a laser light through it and you get what looks like a three-dimensional image of the rose. Now the interesting thing about a hologram is if you cut it in half, this piece of film, and shine a laser through each piece, you don't get half a rose out of each piece, you still get an entire rose. You cut in 4, you get 4 roses. You cut in 8, you get 8 roses. As I've said in some of my other talks, if you can just forgive me for repeating myself for the benefit of the people that haven't heard this, I always liken this to watching television. That when you watch a TV show, say you're watching Johnny Carson on your television set, you know that the image on your TV set is one form that the information is in, that is in the TV signal, and you know that picture comes from the radio waves that permeate the room that your TV set is in. But you wouldn't say where in the room is Johnny Carson's face, or where's Johnny Carson, because you know that wherever you put the TV set, you're going to tune into the entire image. And that's what a hologram is like. Wherever you take the hologram, the piece of photographic film, and look for the image, you're going to find it. And we also have other examples of this in that biological life seems to be like this also. You know, if you have an embryo at a certain stage of development and divide it in half, you don't get half a child in each piece. You get identical twins, because each piece contains the whole in some strange sense. The same is true of a magnet. I don't know if any of you have seen the demonstration of, you know, where you put a bar magnet under a piece of paper and sprinkle iron filings on top, and you have a north end and a south end. When you break that magnet in half, you don't have just a piece with just one end, a north end. Then each piece still has a north-south, and you can see the magnetic field in the filings, the way that it forms. And around the single bar magnet forms in a sort of oval, but you break it in half and then it forms into two smaller ovals, each around each bar magnet. So again, these are all examples of things that are kind of organized in this holographic way, where the whole is contained in every part of what we look at. Now, when I say interconnectedness, the reason that this suggests that things are interconnected is because it means that, quite literally, if the universe is a hologram, that you can find the universe in every piece of itself, that every part, every grain of sand, as you know, the poet William Blake said, contains the entire universe in some semblance. And this, people have used this to explain psychic phenomena, or how we can seemingly access information from other people's minds, because if each of us contains, in some sense, the entire universe, if we can access where that information is, we can access things in other people's minds. You know, many parapsychologists have pointed out how interesting this is so. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard of the remote viewing experiments at Stanford, where they would take people and they would have a person back at the lab just sitting there, and then they'd send out a person somewhere, and they'd say, okay, at a prescribed time, try to tell what that other person is looking at. And they would send that other person to a location chosen at random, and the other person would describe this amazing, the person sitting in the lab would describe with amazing accuracy what the other person was looking at. And it's interesting. These remote viewing experiments, there have been about 50 different labs around the world that have done them. And another interesting thing, there's just a sort of a footnote, is that in about 30 of the labs that have done it, they've gotten really positive results. About 20 of the labs have gotten no results, which is another thing that comes in psychic phenomena. I think phenomena have to do with consciousness in general, and that is, you can't quantify them with the same precision that you can quantify the way that billiard balls strike each other in a table, because consciousness is a more mercurial thing. And a lot of people say, well, if you can't duplicate it every time, it doesn't exist. But it's clear that when we're working in this realm, that's not necessarily true. And many of you probably heard of the great physician Rene Dubos, and he says sometimes the most measurable, if we only focus on the most measurable, we push out sometimes the most important. And I think that in this area that's true. So this is a very important application of the holographic idea, but it's not one that I'm going to talk about too much today, but I did want to just mention it. One that is much more appropriate to what I'm going to talk about today is that has to do with this idea that we do construct holograms in our head for what's out there. And I'm sure all of you have heard the conundrum, you know, at some point in your life you've thought, well, when I look at green and you look at green, do we each see the same thing? I mean, we'd each describe it as green, but we don't really have any knowledge of whether we're each perceiving the same thing. It's difficult to know. And Pribram has really taken this to an extreme, because he says that really, since all of our reality is a mental construct in our head, we don't know that that reality is out there. And he kind of, even though he fudges a little on this, because it is a very radical thing for an academic type person to be saying, but he if you back him into a corner, which I've done on occasion, he will say that he really doesn't believe that the color green is out there, or that a tree, what we see inside our heads as a tree, is out there. What's out there, he says, is kind of an ocean of frequency that we interpret and convert into these images. And again, this is the same in this TV analogy, is if you think about it, these are my words, not Pribram's, but it's almost as if we're all conscious TV sets, that what we have inside our head is the same as the image on the TV. But just as Johnny Carson isn't in your living room when you're watching him on the TV, Primitive is saying is that the color green and the table and everything that are out there aren't really out there.